DNA, the stuff that you're made of. And we're going to be talking about the key people that helped lead to DNA and its discovery. So, what we know, all living things contain DNA. Remember, DNA also means deoxynucleic acid. It's a really long word, but all I really want you to know is the acronym or the initials DNA. DNA gives us a code or a set of blueprints on how to make proteins. Remember, everything in your body is and made of protein. So examples we talked about earlier in the year were muscles, hair, skin, bone. Now, recently when we were talking about this in class, we were talking about if you ever got a cut on your hand, your body would start bleeding, but after a couple minutes, the blood would start to clot up and it would stop bleeding. But after a couple days, you would notice, I don't have any blood there anymore. It's starting to make new skin. So what's happening in the body is DNA is being told, hey, we need some new skin. That skin is protein. So the DNA gives us a code or a blueprint on how then those cells can go make new copies of themselves and build new proteins to fill this in. First person we're going to talk about is Oswald Avery. He discovered that DNA stores and transmits genetic information from one generation to the next. So the big thing with this is you might look like your parents, you might have one person's nose, you might have brown hair from your mother. That information, the DNA, went from both your mom and your dad, and together they created a new organism, which was you. Now, part of their genetic information was transferred to you. So, discovered that DNA stores and transmits genetic information. That's how it became important. Erwin Chargaff. He discovered that DNA is made of 4 nitrogen bases. So remember when we were talking about the ladder, the two sides, those would be the sugar and the phosphate. The middle is the nitrogen bases. That would be A, T, G, and C. So you can also remember, ain't that cool guacamole? So that's adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. He also realized that A and T always pair together, and C and G always pair together. Rosalind Franklin. She made one of the most important DNA discoveries. In the early 50s, she took an X-ray of DNA and sample and recorded the pattern. It looked like an X. This gave us a clue to what DNA must look like. And the other unfortunate thing was she was exposed to a lot of X-rays when she was doing this research, and she didn't realize, kind of like when you go to the dentist, that you should wear one of those vests. And she died an early death in the early 1960s from cancer. Here's a picture of that X shape that she discovered with DNA. A few years later, these two gentlemen, James Watson and Francis Crick, using Rosalind Franklin's X-ray of DNA, helped come up with DNA structure that was known as the double helix. The double helix looks like a spiral staircase. So this where it's going side to side. And that's the shape that basically DNA shrinks and crinkles into to help store as much information in such a small amount of space. Now, these gentlemen did win the Nobel Prize for physics and got a lot of attention for it. Rosalind Franklin kind of disappeared for many years, and it wasn't really rediscovered her big breakthrough until the late 80s, early 90s. And that's when she started getting a lot more credit. But she never got a Nobel Prize in physics. She never got any money. And unfortunately, due to all the x-rays that she took, she most likely died a lot earlier death than she would have. But for her discovery, we'll always be grateful. That's a little about DNA, and that's where we're going to finish today.